So welcome. This is the Asia Pacific gas call for October 7th. Um, I put the minutes in here. So these are the minutes to the Google Doc. So Willem, you can't access these, but I came up with a couple different possible solutions
Mhm.
for our friends in China. And looks like the SharePoint one Willem can access. So that might be the one that we go with for the time being. And I'll put that in here too. Or you can get to it from the link I just provided.
So SharePoint works. Way to go, Matt. You solved the problem.
I did. So
Hooray.
hooray. So why don't we just go ahead and I'll update these notes with all the stuff at the top, like all the header stuff at the top. But for now, we can just use these for the minutes. All right. So great. We have a winner. Um, the The other thing that I had was we had talked about at the end of the last meeting, possibly using some of this time to talk about inner sourcing. I know that we don't want to just turn this into the inner source meeting, but there does seem to be some interest from folks on the call on this topic. And a few things really that just came up at the end were possible metrics. I don't know. Can you see me highlight things in SharePoint? You know how, like in Google
Yeah,
Docs, you can see people highlight things?
yeah, I can see. Yeah,
Okay,
possible
so
metric.
yeah, exactly. So possible metrics. I think one of the things that had come up after Daniel's talk last time was possible metrics um, around value, value of a project to a developer, or value of a project to a developer team.
Yeah.
So that's something that we could talk about.
Uh, yeah,
And then
I
this,
also.
I'll just, yeah, go ahead, Willem.
Oh, okay. I I spent some time on the inner source common, and I
Mm-hmm.
found that they are using CHAOSS projects let me check. I just found a very interesting topic slides. Uh, uh, just I think it's 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
There is in a source common virtual summit, and there is um, a talk about using some metrics for the inner source. So in this talk, it's mentioned about chaos.
Okay.
And I think there's maybe someone already do these kind of things, but we may need to bring them together.
Yep.
And I know a bunch of guys in China. They quite interesting about the inner source, but just because of the golden week, I cannot get in touch with them. But I will try my best to find them out, and
Okay.
they may quite interesting about these things.
Do you remember in the inner source commons if there were any metrics that were
Oh,
particularly interesting to you and the
uh,
work that you do?
I think they are quite interesting about the developer, the new guys come into the project, but
Okay.
but this may cause some troubles for the stabilities because of the new guys coming, and
Hmm.
it takes time to let more people um, uh, get familiar with
Hmm.
the project. So it could be a challenge for, but the metrics is quite useful for us to find out if there's a new guys coming.
Okay.
And currently for my inner source projects, I think it could be a challenge for them to bring new guys
Gotcha.
in. So so that could be a very useful metrics. And another thing is we may need to know better about the project sustainable or
Sustainability.
yeah, sustainability. Yeah. So sometimes if there's only one or two people work on this project, it could
Yep.
be a bus factor, and we want to let more people to work on this project, but this could be a challenge because few people get the chance to work on this project because there is let me check. Let me say, uh, if there's an upstream project and a downstream project, sometimes the consumer, the provider produce the software, but it could be it's their daily job to maintain this, to maintain the projects, but for the downstreams, they may not have the responsibility to maintain the projects, to maintain the upstream projects. So it could be let me say in my company, we treat the customer as a guard. So sometimes if the customer not happy about the work we done, we get the complaints, and it could be a serious complaints. And for in the inner source world, it looks like the downstream project, they need to help themselves to resolve some basic problems. But for the upstream, if the upstream maintainer did a lot of work, they don't have time to do the new development. So I think the workload could be a metrics for us to check the sustainability of the projects.
Mm-hmm. Taking notes on this. So what I heard on the last one was, it was interesting. I've never heard in the CHAOSS project talk about concern about the maintenance downstream. So we've talked a lot about kind of upstream dependency and our concern, like a project's concern with respect to upstream.
Yeah.
But typically when we talk downstream, it's been more about just trying to understand how many people are using a project downstream, or where the project is being used downstream. But I don't think we've ever talked about it from a maintenance perspective, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's quite strange for me, but in my company, we have a principle. It's like the customer is very important for us. We will do all we could do to certify them. But when this comes to the internal stuff, if someone provides a service for the others, they may think the same way. But I think I read a lot of paper about the inner source. It's like each one appear they should treat them equally. So I think this is quite
interesting.
Yeah. It's interesting, but I think I need to let my colleagues know about they should treat them equally and try to help them because they are engineers.
Mhm.
They are supposed to fix by themselves. And if we provide enough information, they should be do it that way. So
Mhm.
this is new things for me to convince them. So I need to spend some time to
Interesting.
talk about that.
Does anybody have comments on that? Or has anybody seen or heard this conversation in the project about downstream?
Hi everyone, this is Daniel. Sorry for the delay.
Hi.
Hi,
Okay.
So, well, part of the discussion we tend to have from time to time, this is from a more customer perspective, is, well, if you want to run this project by yourself and develop this by yourself, then you will have certain downstream cost instead of directly working upstream. So then you need to deal with upstream, and then once you have a new release cycle or whatever internally, when you are delivering or deploying this internally, you need to update your downstream version. I don't know. So you know more or less how Remote Lab works. So let's imagine that there is this new company um, creating a couple of backends, and with all of the tool chain, so the code for retrieving information, the code to transform the data, and the code to visualize everything. So each time there is an update in Remote Lab, then they need to update perhaps the code downstream. So this is a maintenance cost. If this is part of the release cycle upstream, all of this code, then they don't need to have this downstream version, just as an example. So this is, if you are working or contracting with an open source company, this is something you should take into account. If you prefer to work downstream, or at least not with the upstream version of the code, and this is extra cost.
Yeah, sometimes for the downstream part, it just provides a service for them and answer the questions and even provide bug fix for them. But it's really time-consuming work. So, so I still want to bring the inner source ideas to support for product support. And if the people know better about the project, they may help themselves. So that is what I can see from the inner source.
I was adding to the notes as well. I think so. I was the MC during the inner source commons. So Agustin was the one talking about CHAOSS. I'm adding the link there, and I'm specifically linking to the metrics that he was discussing about, that are software delivery process metrics. Those are about stability and so on. Oh, Matthew, you're mute.
Oh yeah, I'm on mute. Did you add those to the Google Doc?
I'm adding in the Google Doc at the end of the agenda, but I'm not.
Can you copy and paste those into the document I'm putting in the chat?
Okay.
Sorry. We're going to use the SharePoint doc because it's accessible in China.
Oh, good.
By the way, I think if I use the company's computers, I cannot access the Google Doc. So I use my personal computer. I can access the Google Doc and SharePoint.
Hopefully this will work for others. Yeah.
Matt, it seems I cannot access.
Oh, that's a funny.
That's hilarious.
Just shifted the. Well,
I can access the SharePoint site just fine.
Okay, so this just says the following.
That's.
Huh. I wonder if it's because you're logged into another instance of SharePoint somewhere, because it's detecting your email and identity.
Yeah.
So I think I'm logged into the VMware SharePoint right now.
I mean, I think I made it totally accessible, you know. That's funny. Yeah, anyone with the link can edit.
Security and usability are so
It was so close.
in conflict with each other.
Shoot. All right, well, I don't have a solution right now. Daniel, I'll take your notes from
sure.
Google Doc, put them into SharePoint, and try to find a solution that works in Spain and China.
I guess I should have access to this, but we need to guess how. Anyway, and I'm adding another discussion that was the other discussion about metrics from Comcast. So they said, okay, maybe William, as you were attending the conference, you remember this, but we have the inner source office now. So, well, our inner source established. So now what? And then they were discussing and bringing some examples they are having for inner source metrics. So those are the two examples that come to my mind.
Okay, I saw two links. There's YouTube links.
Mm-hmm.
So
can you access them?
I think I can access them. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So these are the two moments in the video that they are discussing about specific metrics.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. So it's seen as a common virtual summit, I guess.
Oh yeah, indeed. This time is going to be APAC friendly. So this is going to be more friendly for you in your time zone. Well, I am assuming you are in Asia.
Yeah.
And this is going to be on the 2nd and 3rd of December. So you are more than welcome to submit.
Yeah. I already know about the call for proposal.
Okay.
This is interesting. I think one of the things that this raises for me, and this is for the CHAOSS project a bit larger, is we're starting to get different groups that have an interest in metrics that are meaningful to their particular corner of the world. And so, for example, we've been having a talk on the community call yesterday about metrics that would be important to academics. So if there's a university that has an open source program office, what are the metrics that they care about to track?
Let the dogs in.
That's me. The other was science. So for example, scientific open source software. So again, like a dashboard or a panel that is at least helpful in that regard. And it seems like inner source might be a candidate for this as well, that from a tooling perspective, here are the set of whatever 10 or 15 metrics that can help provide insight with respect to inner source or with respect to academe or with respect to science. Mm-hmm. Should we think about, and even like the app ecosystem working group, they're doing it in the app ecosystem space, particularly working with the GNOME Foundation. So there's this increasingly common set of requests to say, we are a group that lives in this context, and you have these 45 metrics going up over time. Which of these would be important for us in our own particular context to shine light on the things that we care about? We haven't really thought about a way to formally build dashboards that might be helpful in these particular contexts, or visuals that might be helpful in these particular contexts. Is this something that we should be doing in the CHAOSS project as a whole, not just for inner source? People have thoughts on this.
The dashboard part is quite interesting, and I think my boss will quite interested about that. Sometimes the management team wants to know what's going on these projects. So dashboard is definitely a very useful tools for us, and it's even we also need some software to get the data and displays all the things on the dashboard. So it's good need some program work to do.
Do other people have thoughts on this? Do you have no idea what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Is it too early in the United States?
I admit to multitasking. But I don't have a lot of experience with InnerSource anyways. So I'm just
this was about like a process in the CHAOSS project about trying to build dashboards that are meaningful to particular contexts. So in science, like there's a group of people who are doing scientific software and they care about health of scientific software. So they're like, how do we even begin to look at these things? Like, what should we even care about? And that set of metrics is a different set of metrics than, say, folks who are in academe. So they're like, we care about open source projects that are going through the university, and we want to track those for a variety of different reasons. And InnerSource is a third context, and the app ecosystem is a fourth context. And we've never, in the CHAOSS project, thought about how we would kind of process-wise build dashboards or metrics that are meaningful to a particular context. We've never really thought about that in a lot of detail. And so the question was like, do we want to do this? You know, do we want to help kind of foster the process where we'd say, if you're an InnerSource person, here's an available dashboard or visual of like literally like 4 to 6 metrics that would help you begin to track what's going on internally in the InnerSource way. Or if you're in scientific software, again, here's a set of maybe 4 to 6, low bar, 4 to 6 metrics that would help you gain a little bit of insight with respect to your scientific software project. So is this, this is like a larger CHAOSS question. Do we even want to go down this path or no?
That's a good.
I personally, oh, go ahead, Don.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that's a good question. It's not something I've thought a lot about. I mean, I do think you're right. There are definitely different contexts for this. I think I don't know that it's something the CHAOSS project itself should necessarily build, but what we might want to do, like Sean did with some of the Augur notebooks, is like create a place where people could put their examples based on their context. So it might make sense for, you know, for this group or some people to do maybe an InnerSource one and post it, but that's just an example, right? And then you can take it and you can do what you want with it, because I find that metrics are so, I don't know, the way I like to use metrics is I like to tie them back to, you know, some sort of goals or something I'm trying to achieve, which means that the metrics that I need are going to be different than the metrics that anybody else needs, because my goals are going to be at least a little bit different. So I feel like it's something that would be highly customizable, kind of like a Jupyter notebook is, where you might maybe use it as a starting point.
Yeah, I think that's a point well taken, right? Something that's like, let's just orient you, whatever context matters to you. But of course you do have to customize these things locally as meaningful for you. Cool. Elizabeth?
I was just going to say, I really like that idea a lot of building more of a community and like enabling others to create samples for other people to use. One thing that comes to mind is specifically with universities. You know, I feel like most universities are similar, like pretty similar, right? So they, you know, would want to have the same kind of things available. So like one person at a university could do that. I think that I really think that we should have a role in this somewhere, because I feel like that is an opportunity for us to kind of show our value in a deeper way, of just, besides just putting the metrics out there, well, then we're going to take it a step further. I think that would be really helpful for us long term to be the center of that before someone else does, I guess. So I think that would be important. And I also just want to say, I'm not sure how we would address this, but my only reservation with doing that is that, especially with something like an inner source, I can see management just looking at the numbers and maybe not going deeper, and pushing the numbers more than they should, instead of pushing the good practices and behaviors that lead to those numbers. Just because I think that kind of happens sometimes, obviously in corporations, where the numbers become the center, the goal, and not the actual things that make the numbers go. So that would be my only, if we put those out there from us as an official CHAOSS thing, I feel like we should put some kind of disclaimer or something around them to not, make sure people aren't sabotaging their own efforts in, hopes to make the numbers look better for whatever reason. So
that's a very good point. So one of the things that I've tried to do at the Inner Source Commons when it's to educate people about the use and avoid misuse of metrics, based on some of the topics that you mentioned. So don't punish those that are doing it in a different way. Try to learn. Try to move them to a more, blah, blah, blah. So perhaps this might be something that we may do as well in CHAOSS about good practices when using metrics. Have some kind of, what we've learned so far. So for instance, I remember having certain conversations where people are really like gamification, and where I'm basically against using that. I'm working at a lot of teams when we are talking about inner source, just avoid focusing too much on individuals, because then at the level of team, and then you bring everyone to discuss and have certain sense of ownership when defining the metrics that they are going to use to evaluate the team performance, for instance. So all of this, open source, inner source, or any other context or scenario, I think it's something we can help with from a CHAOSS perspective. What do you think?
I agree. Listening to, so one, I wrote ethics statement. I think, haven't we been meaning to do an ethics statement at some point?
Oh,
All right, so,
reasons this keeps coming up.
Oh, yeah, okay. So maybe that should just be done at some point. Like maybe I'll take that on and at least offer something that we can workshop off of, because this needs to be done. And then I think, Daniel, your point was not necessarily around ethics, but around maybe best, I don't like that term, but practices that people could use with respect to the metrics. Just here are some ways to think about them, which is great. And then I started wondering about, how we have the community health reports. Don't worry, I'm not saying we just start saying, if you want an inner source health report, let us know. If you want an academic health, I'm not saying that, but
that would be hard.
That would be impossible. We don't have the ability to do that. But the health reports, so the community health reports, right? They're a way for us to basically just say, listen, if you're running an open source community, here's 4 metrics that we think might help kind of locate you a little bit better with understanding the health of open source and open source project. Undefined. We just kind of say we don't really care what it is. It's very, very generic. But what if, as part of the health reports kind of program, we said at the same time, there's also these notebooks, to Don's point, or dashboards that could provide a little bit deeper meaning with respect to, say, inner source, with respect to academics, with respect to scientific software. Like that could be the place where we locate this work. I don't know what people think about that. Because we do have a program that's kind of doing this at a very generic level with the community health reports. And this wouldn't be maintained by Sean or people at Grimoire Lab. This would just be like a one-time notebook thing. And people could, to Don's point, even contribute back if they have modified their notebook in such a way that they would like to share it with others, no problem. That'd be great. But we could like kind of seed it by saying, here's an example inner source one, here's an example academic one, here's an example scientific software one.
Or we could do one or two and encourage other people then to submit them for their own contexts. So there might be other contexts that we're not really thinking about. I mean, OSPOs might be a separate context. There might be. Yeah, I don't know.
Yep.
Do we know if anyone has done this already?
The folks at Grimoire Lab, there is the panel, a page for panels. Yeah. Daniel, I can never remember that, but I don't think it's categorized like this.
In that sense, it's more focused perhaps by data source.
Okay.
And then we have the concept of like cycle of repositories, and then you can use that concept of like cycle of repositories or activity in any environment.
Okay.
Let me look for this.
And then Sean, I don't know, do you maintain a kind of a public repository of the notebooks that you've created?
Yeah, it's Augur Community Reports is a public repository. We have other notebooks that we haven't made. I guess the word I would use is easily accessible to everyone. So the notebooks that we have in the community reports just run. They just work. The other ones, we have to do some credential normalization and parameterization on the actual reports, and we are working on that, but we're trying not to release things that don't just work out of the box, because we don't want to support that, basically.
Do you have a link to those?
Yeah.
That you could put in the chat? Because I mean, the link that Daniel put in, I don't know if you're all over at that Sigils, Grimoire Lab Sigils with all of the panels.
Yeah. So for instance, the second example is about contributors growth. So this is a panel, which is a dashboard that is focused on understanding the growth of the contributors in any data source you are tracking. So if this is open source, you can think of, I don't know, adoption of the technology or similar stuff, perhaps impact of certain actions that you are having. From an inner source perspective, this panel might be interesting about how your collaboration or inner source adoption is evolving over time, which are different goals, but at the end they are using kind of the same metrics, dashboards. So yeah, we don't have proper, let's say, from that perspective in Grimoire Lab, we don't have like a proper beam for each of these areas. Although if we are discussing about inner source, we can bring the same dashboards, for instance, or similar metrics.
Okay. Dropping all this into the notes.
Yeah, I don't know where to take notes. I've tried to use.
I think
it's a mess. I created a mess, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
I'll bring them together.
Yeah, but definitely at the Inner Source Commons, there is interest in advancing in the metrics scenarios. As you can see, we had a couple of talks in metrics. Mine was not accepted.
What?
Yeah, and they were discussing about the dashboard they are producing, other people about bringing the topic of delivery metrics that are important for internal development. And those are metrics that are interesting as well for open source communities, most of them.
Oh, thanks. Okay, so Sean got the community reports in there too. It's in the SharePoint at the bottom. I'll put it in here too.
Anyway, I tried to access the SharePoint with 3 different email addresses. Didn't work. I don't know.
Sure, that may. I don't know. So, I mean, from the sounds of it, this work is being done, whether it's in what you were talking about, Daniel, with the panels, or Sean, are there notebooks in here?
Yeah, but they don't show up. I don't have a nice, I guess this is with GitHub Pages.
Uh-huh.
Daniel's built this, so I'm not showing the examples. The examples of what those notebooks output, I can also put in here.
Because it sounds like we might have a lot of resources all over the place. That if we wanted to bring this together by saying, here's a couple seed examples for, to your point, Daniel, like InnerSource, or
Yeah.
for
So-
corporate OSPOS, here's a couple that might kind of locate you in the right spot.
I'm thinking that perhaps if we want to bring some more to be more attractive to others, maybe we can try to go to the inner source commons and try to have a talk around. So I've already done a couple of talks there, no, at least one, and one in CHAOSS, yeah, about the inner source commons. But at the inner source commons, if we open the discussion about, hey, we've been discussing this internally, and these are based on the attendees that we have in this meeting. These are the metrics that we are interested in for this aspect, or I don't know, collaboration or communication or anything else. And we've been working in this set of panels. So we have opened, I don't know, a branch or a leg or specific area to work on metrics. And then we have these metric templates. We are working with dashboards or notebooks or so. So then we can bring attention to the topics we are covering in CHAOSS.
I like that.
I've been indeed mentioned that CHAOSS is seen in somehow, or will be seen in the future as a standard in the industry for this type of metrics. So we are in a good position now to say, oh, this is what CHAOSS thinks, or so what do you think? Do you want to improve this? Come to CHAOSS, and then we can improve the metrics or add some more.
All right, cool. So
I guess these are Google Docs that I shared, so maybe I should export them somehow here.
So as an action item, maybe is to kind of wrangle these thoughts down into a couple things. One is we have to, I think, get a lay of the land on what we even have available right now. The second would be what, in the case of, say, inner source commons, would it be like a birds of a feather session, Daniel? Kind of a workshop that you would think?
So there, so we have keynotes. Probably we don't fit there. Then regular sessions of 20 minutes or 15 minutes, and then community sessions of 10 minutes.
Okay.
And then there are breakout sessions of 40 minutes, where one of them is usually around the topic of metrics.
Okay.
We've had these breakout sessions during the last couple of virtual summits. So I think this is happening this time as well.
Okay. I suppose I should be typing this but I put like listening, like how we would propose to listen to the conversation around inner source, or listen to the conversation around OSPOs, or listen to the conversation. Like we probably need to think about that.
Hey, Matt, I'm going to email you a couple of PowerPoints that you
Okay.
can maybe add to your SharePoint and make accessible.
I don't know that I'm going to be using SharePoint, but whatever.
Well, I have, I obviously the Google Doc links I shared are not going to work.
Okay. And then the other thing that I think we would need to kind of think about in the CHAOSS project is like a process by which we would make these available to people, and by which people could contribute, these being panels and these being Jupyter notebooks. I don't have an answer to that.
又开会啊？
是
So a process to discover and contribute.
不懂他们。
Hello.
Hello.
Right.
I like random family drop-ins.
Nah, I do too.
Yeah.
Pets
Put a
and
lock on-
family.
I put a lock on my basement door to try to make those
Prevent
less
that.
frequent. Yeah.
All right, cool. Do people have thoughts on this? It seems to be, I mean, this is something we could talk about in the community call too. Other thoughts? I have get lay of the land, like available resources. How do we set up listening? And then how do we set up a process to discover what's available and also contribute?
Perhaps I was. Oh, Sean,
Yeah.
go ahead. You were going to say, or Willem.
Yeah, I just want to ask, will we start a work group or just a new talk? It's not like a work group, I'm right?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure yet. I don't know.
Yeah.
Hold that question. I don't like the hope is that we can do this within the existing meeting structures
Mhm.
or out of band. I think we're approaching max capacity on the number of meetings that we can have in the CHAOSS project. So I'm not sure, but my guess is there'll be a lot of people that are interested in this, and kind of how do we assemble kind of a low bar of metrics that kind of orient different groups as to provide insight on the things they care about. For example, like Willem, you had mentioned like bus factor, you had mentioned new contributors. Like these may be inner source things that would be great for these preliminary panels or notebooks. And then Daniel had mentioned also talking about this at Inner Source Commons. What are the things that people would like to see?
Yeah, what I have in mind is, if it makes sense, maybe as a proposal is, so there are a couple of, we are working at the Inner Source Commons with the concept of pattern. I've shared a couple of links as an example of what a pattern is. So there's one about introducing metrics in Inner Source, and there is another one related to maturity model. So let me share this here in the chat. Patterns is kind of the way we are kind of having these high-level concept discussions. So we may add other patterns that are kind of more related to metrics. So if we work in both worlds, we can define metrics here in CHAOSS as, I don't know, we measure collaboration in these 5 ways, I don't know, whatever. And then we can try to create a pattern at the Inner Source Commons as measuring collaboration. So then we link to the work done in CHAOSS and even the technology that we have in CHAOSS, if it's possible. Because in Inner Source Commons, we are not initially having any type of technology, or we are not. This is not one of the goals. The goal is about train and educate people around the use of Inner Source and adoption of Inner Source good practices. So this might be a good way to cross-reference both communities.
So what is a pattern here? So if I'm looking at this, I see a title.
Yeah, a pattern is, well, the usual definition of pattern is a proven solution to existing problem. Mm-hmm. So at the Inner Source Commons, we are working with patterns to define, or to land any kind of issue that anyone is facing when introducing Inner Source. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know, change middle manager's mindset. That's a problem. So then there is a pattern to deal with this. So there is a problem statement. There are forces against and in favor of the change. There is a context, and then there is a solution. And then the solution might have worked in certain organizations. So depending on the pattern, you will see like a list of organizations where this has successfully been applied. So the pattern is, I have the problem of I'm trying to measure collaboration, but I don't know how. So we have a problem. So then we need to look for a solution for this. So we have everything. Then basically what we have is a pattern.
So you develop a pattern and then the pattern is based on a problem that you're trying to solve, whether it's in inner source, whether it's in an OSPO, whether it's in, and then
in the case of the inner source commons, it's only focused on inner source.
Yep, right. And then from that pattern, you develop techniques to overcome that problem. Is that right?
Yeah, there are some cases where there are organizations that they have faced that problem and they have solved this problem with this specific pattern. And this is why they are sharing that pattern with a solution. There are some cases where we don't have a solution, so then this is called a donut, because we are missing kind of the central piece, which is the solution.
Okay. So do you publish patterns without solutions? Is that possible?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the first link, oh no, not the first link, this, the link I'm adding in the Google Doc, so this one in the chat.
So then if I stuck with the inner source example, a pattern would be we have bad, it's like to your point, it's collaboration. And the problem is we have bad cross-team collaboration on this thing, on this project. So where do metrics come into this?
So first you need to apply a policy. Second, you need to measure if the policy is working.
Okay.
So when measuring is where metrics come to the discussion.
Okay, so it's a bit like action research kind of thing. So you have this problem and you have an action that you take, and then the idea is that you measure the results. You can measure before, obviously, what does collaboration look like in this case before you take an action, and what does it look like after? All right. Okay.
And there are indeed companies that are saying we are using these metrics. For instance, in the Comcast, sorry, in the Comcast presentation in YouTube, they have like 4 or 5 main areas, well, meritocracy and some others, and then they are detailing some metrics. So
would
they are using?
Would a panel or say a Jupyter notebook, that would be the set of metrics to measure the impact of a particular action. So you would say, here's the pattern, or here's the pattern. Here's the associated notebook or panel that you should probably be tracking with respect to collaboration. You can take an action and then continue to use this panel to observe the impact of that action. Is that right?
Yeah, might work in that way. Perhaps another way is to have another pattern, but both patterns are really related to each other.
Okay. Interesting.
But the more implementation, discussion, so metrics in CHAOSS is in a good
position. No, I like it because it localizes it a little bit. It kind of grounds the metrics to something, to some action. So okay, well, we're at the end. So we I think there's a bunch of things to think about here. This is super interesting. All right, well, till next time. Hopefully by next time I can kind of come to the group with maybe some proposals as to what this could look like, not just for inner source, but others as well. So and maybe else, would you all be interested to solicit topics for the next agenda item? I had a few and we kind of got on this one. Or not. Okay.
I think maybe when it's not Golden Week, we can ask that question of the Asia Pacific community and get an answer that is good. Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much. It's good to see everybody.
Good to see you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.